Want to be photogenic. All right, upcoming speakers. I've talked to Phil Chandler, and he is still willing to do it, but we have to pick a time because, again, he's in England, so the time shift is bloody awful. So, you guys okay with like 6 for a meeting?
PM?
What's that?
PM or PM?
PM. Nobody's coming in that early.
He's Skyping it?
Yeah, he's going to Skype in from England. I highly recommend that you watch some of his videos online. I'll go ahead and start posting some YouTube videos so that people can see what his work is. Phil is a very nice guy. He's predominantly the guy who does top bar beekeeping, which is, he's my go-to guy when somebody asks me a top bar question, since I'm probably not going to have a good answer for you. But Phil is well known and world renowned for top bar beekeeping. If you ever read any of his books, he's known as the Barefoot Beekeeper, and he's got a couple of books published. You can find them all online. He's also offered us a discount code to one of his stores, so I'll be posting that in a little while. We're trying to hash out the details. But he's kind of a bigger guy, at least overseas. Over here, he's big in the treatment-free community and some of that type of beekeeping. He'll be the first to tell you there's a time to use treatments, but he's much more sparing with it than a lot of people, just because he is into the brood breaks. It's not quite OTS, but it's similar. Top bar beekeeping is quite a bit different. If you have particularly aggressive stock, top bar beekeeping can be, a much more calm option. You're only exposing a little bit of the bees. Let's see. Build a box day.
In October, we're going to have USDA come in and talk about the programs that they offer.
Okay, very cool. We also got an email. I didn't get to talk to him. We got an email about an insurance company that wanted to talk to us about insuring beehives. I don't know if that would be something a lot of people would be interested in. So I wanted to ask people, because it's something people don't talk about that much, insuring your business so that you can sell honey without any worries, or just insuring against loss so you don't lose the beehives, or if you do lose the beehives, they're covered. So it was a gentleman from Nationwide. I guess he talked to you at the fair.
No, I don't think I was there when.
Okay.
There was one or two times I wasn't there. But I guess the question I had was, is it going to cover a hobbyist, or is it just?
I'm sure they would. Because even a hobbyist, if you're selling it, a lot of people want insurance. Ohio doesn't require it because we have cottage laws. But a good example is my cousin in Virginia. He is required by law, if he wants to sell any of his own honey, to have insurance. So our state is very lax. Not all states are.
Insurance for what?
The honey. You are a food seller. They consider it a food sale. I mean, it is. We all know it's sterile and it's going to stay sterile unless you're really sketchy. But still. So I'm going to talk about it if people are interested in that. You can tell me after. We don't have to schedule now. Build a box. Has anybody built their own equipment yet? Or are you guys mostly just buying assembled?
Boxes together.
So me and my partner have ordered an absolutely ridiculous number of boxes. If y'all want to learn how to assemble them, we would sure love to help. We just ordered 500 boxes, 5,000 frames, and we have another 400 coming, towards the end of the year. So, yeah, good times. So if anybody wants to learn how to build boxes, talk to me. We can definitely teach you how to build equipment. Frames are a lot easier than you think they are. There's a trick to it if you need to make large numbers, but it's neat to learn. They always show you the little jigs. The jigs are a terrible way to make frames. It takes forever. Let's see.
So are we going to have a date, or are you just going to post that on Facebook? Or?
Well, I'm asking if people want to even do it. I don't know who's interested. Okay, we'll get a few people. So we'll pick a date. I'll post it on Facebook. So check Facebook, and we'll work out a date that works for the majority of people. It takes a good long while to make that much equipment, and it's going to take me way longer to wax dip it all, because we do wax dip everything. At some point, I highly recommend that everybody wax dips, just because your stuff will last 1,000 times longer. We've got a couple of boxes that are 30 years old now.
So did we decide on the speaker starting at 6 o'clock?
That's what I'm leaning towards. Does anybody else have any?
Because we'd have to like start right on time if he's coming in.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
For sure.
No, I mean, not go with.
I got you. It was funny. I'm never on time.
5:30. 5:30.
It's so much funnier. It should be. No. But 6 sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll start it at 6, and we'll have the, that's when we'll talk to him?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll just have the meeting after the.
Correct. We'll have the meeting after we talk to him, and then we could even discuss what we learned in the videos. But I do highly recommend that you Google and YouTube some of his work so that you're kind of a little bit familiar with it already. It is a completely different style of beekeeping that they do over there. He runs nationals, he runs standards, he runs a couple of hives that we don't see over here. So those are options if you ever want to try that style of beekeeping. Just because they don't run them over here doesn't mean they're not perfectly useful things to do. Quadratic hives are one I want to try one of these days. They're actually perfectly square, so that you can actually, as the hive goes up, you can make boxes at 90 degrees to one another, so your frames actually change direction. And there's some advantage to that as far as moisture and temperature control.
So that would be September 17th?
Correct.
Which is the third Monday in September. At 6 o'clock is when the meeting will start.
And I'll try to confirm that with him and make sure that's all right and that works. If there's any changes, I'll post it on Facebook. It's hard when you're dealing with people way, way off.
And we'll use like Eastern Standard Time, not Greenwich Mean Time or something like that, right? Okay.
All right. I'm going to open the floor and I'm going to hand this over to John. I'm going to get the heck out of the way.
I do have a couple of additional new business things.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay. Elections are in November. So there is actually supposed to be elections are in November. There really is supposed to be a election committee, but basically, if you read the bylaws, it says that it's run by the vice president. That's me. And so I think what I'll do, we'll just open it up if anybody wants to run for office or does not want to run for office. I would like to know soon, so that if we can, mostly the I don't want to run for office, so that we can coerce other people into doing it. The other thing is I've already started putting together an agenda for an officers meeting. I think it's about time we had another one. There's some things we need to talk about. Officers meetings are, we typically have had them at Baker Square. That's because it's somebody's favorite restaurant. And they are open to everybody in the club. It's not just officers. We really do want your input. It's just that it's more of a planning meeting instead of a business meeting. So we just hold it on a different night. So when would be a good evening for, I guess, for you, Chuck, and Dan, and any of the
anything but a Friday at this point.
well, I'm good on anything but Tuesdays.
Would it be just as practical to just do it either before or after one of these meetings? And then do a whole nother-
We could.
Denny's is open all night.
Sorry. Yeah, we could do that. We could have officers meeting directly.
We can't hang out here because the farm park wants to close as soon as our meeting's over.
We could have it prior to.
But then that takes
But that, if I'm in the yard,
hive time.
better off going to Denny's after.
Okay.
Or, I don't know, if we can't just hang out here, then might as well do it another night then.
Fine too.
No Fridays, but I'm good.
Okay.
I said no Fridays. Me
You
too.
already said no Fridays, I said no Tuesdays, so. I'll get a hold of Matt, and I'll see if there's any day that he can do it, and then we'll just post it on the Facebook page, and the when and where, and kind of go from there.
I'll bring up some old business too real quick. It's kind of out of order, but I'm just curious. You got in touch with the Ohio web guy?
For the hosting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who to get in touch with
Okay.
over there. I just got from Doug the contact information over there.
Okay. 'Cause I saw I sent it a while ago, but I don't know if they changed. They change things pretty bloody regularly, so sometimes it can be confusing.
So I was gonna probably call one of the board over there just to figure it out.
Okay.
I'm sure somebody will direct me.
No, fair enough.
The website's not ready to go. So.
Okay. Like I said, turn it over. I'll get out the way.
All right. Is this too close just to stand here?
I will move the camera back if it needs to, but no, you fit the screen.
And you can push your two back.
The beauty, oh no, you're fine.
Good.
Yeah, good enough.
Don't want to get too close. Break the camera.
Oh, you're not gonna break the camera. Trust me, if I didn't break the camera, you're not gonna break the camera.
All right.
Good enough.
Thanks, Dan.
No, not a problem.
We got that on.
Thank you.
That's for the record.
I am a menace to my own life.
9.0. All right. So I just want this time just to be as informal as possible, and for you guys just to be asking questions all the way through if you have any. So what I want to do is just give a recap about OTS, and then and feel free to stop me all the way through that, just so the terms make sense as I talk about. I'm going to look back at my apiary, starting really back in last summer, and just the numbers and my processes this year up till today. So, and hopefully that helps some of you understand what I'm doing and what the OTS is capable for you guys in your apiary as well. So, so we'll just start at the top. Number one, OTS is just short for on the spot queen rearing. Really, this is all about raising your own queens. And it's a 3-step process. If you boil it down to its bare essentials, it's a 3-step process over the course of a week and then 30 days later. So step 1, on day 1, you've got a mature colony in your backyard, and you're going to need to make that queenless. So you can either go and find the queen and dispatch or kill her, or what most people are going to do is make an artificial swarm. So they're going to find the queen. She's usually going to be on a frame of brood already, and you're going to take her out and stick her in another nuke box next to it. You're going to find another frame of capped brood and give it to her with the bees on it, and then at least another frame of honey, probably another pollen, and then an empty frame of comb if you've got it. So you can just start with 5 frames, a really small split out of that mature hive that you've overwintered. We're assuming you've overwintered a hive now. And you wouldn't be doing this if you just bought a package, for instance, in May. This is with a mature colony in the spring. So you started that artificial swarm, and she's gonna go gangbusters. It's early spring. That's gonna be a full-size colony before you know it. So that's step 1 on day 1. You now have a queenless colony, and they're going to know that within about 15 minutes, and they're going to start changing their behavior, and they're going to start raising queen cells. The second step at that point right then is to notch, and I put a picture on the back page here, and Dan will attach this PDF on Facebook, and at the bottom there's a link to the PDF, another PDF that has more pictures about notching, okay? And so the main picture, the largest one you can see, that's the size of larva that you're going to notch under. If you're going to be grafting queens and raising queens that way, this is the same exact size larva, the smallest comma-shaped larva. You notice there's a little tiny puddle of royal jelly at the very bottom, that little tiny larva. She's just emerged out of an egg. The egg casing has dissolved and it lays down in that puddle. and that's the perfect age. And the next photo to the top right, you can see where we've taken a hive tool and broken away, or just straight in at the bottom of the cell, and then pulled it down and just we've broken away the bottom flat part of that cell. You can see the top of those cells is still intact, just the bottom has been removed. And for some reason, that instructs the bees, hey, here's a right age larva. We need to make a queen. The bottom has been removed here. Let's make queen cells. And so from that notch right there, they'll usually make at least one, sometimes 2 or 3 queen cells if they've got the right age larva. Now, as well, just a note, this is fresh wax. This is probably, less than a couple weeks old wax. And they really like to make queen cells when you got fresh young wax. The older that wax becomes and cocoons that are layered inside, the more reticent they are to make queen cells. And so the more important it is to notch like this on the larva to help them raise a queen cell. And what we do is, back at that parent hive, I'm notching on every frame that has got 36-hour larvae. So maybe there's usually 2, 3, 4 of those kinds of frames, and I've notched at least once on every one of those. Because if we go back to step 2, a week later, day 8, you go back to that same colony and open it up and do an inspection. Everywhere you've notched, there's a queen cell. You'll have now 3 or 4 frames with a beautiful queen cell on it. And now you've got options. You can cull them all down to just a couple cells, or you can split that hive up into as much, as many nukes as you can afford with what resources you've got. Usually 2 or 3 different starts, different splits you can make now out of those resources. So you've gone from 1 overwinter colony to up to 4 in 1 week. Now those have to go out and mate, which is step 3. Those queens have got to, they'll hatch on the 12th day or so, or 12 days later. And by the 30th day after you notch, she should be laying. Usually it's even earlier than that, about 26, 27, 28 days. You're going to start to see eggs, and you've got a mated queen.
So you leave just 1 queen cell?
Yeah, I don't like to leave. I learned from Mel on this, who wrote the book. I used to just leave a bunch of cells in there, but now I understand that the more cells you leave in there, the more risk you take. With those virgins hatching out, chasing each other around, trying to kill each other, they're wasting energy. They could injure themselves. I've seen it happen where all the queens knock themselves off. You've got a queenless hive again. So if you just have 2, or even just 1, you're good to go. If the one's going to hatch out early and go rip up the one cell, usually it's going to be on the same frame, and then she's going to go take her mating flight in a week, 5 days.
Now, out of curiosity, because he's being shy, if they fail to raise a queen,
Yeah.
would you put in a mated queen at that point, or would you try to let them try a second time?
Yeah, it depends on your goals, how many hives I've got to work with. Typically for me now, I have about, you'll see the numbers, we'll look at the numbers, but usually I get about 75% success. I've got 25% that don't mate I've got to do something with. And the way I look at it is I've got a bunch of resources I'm just going to bring back into and disperse among my other hives and just make them all the more stronger. They got more wax to deal with, or comb to deal with, bees, brood, etc., honey. And I don't worry about it because I started with 1 hive and now I've got 4. If I lose 1, I got 3. I've still tripled the amount of colonies that I started with, and it's not a big deal. So that's how I look at it. You could, there's options. You could grab another frame if you've got a lot of bees in there and good resources. Grab another frame and notch it and larvae, and they'll make another cell. You've just lost another couple weeks or 30 days, depending on how you. Actually, you're going to lose a lot of time. So I just don't think it's worth trying to prop them up. Just cut your losses and combine them. I think it's the best option. So that's just a real quick recap of OTS. It's all about queen rearing and notching and expanding your colonies really quickly. And there's more info at the Facebook page that Dan mentioned, at Mel's page. There's a lot of links on the Facebook page to other blog posts, the book, etc. If you are curious. Number 2, why does OTS work? I jotted down, this is in a blog post on my website, but these are the key reasons why I see this working for novices, especially as my passion is to help people that are just starting out become successful and not have to buy bees after they've bought their first set of bees. So the reason why that works for folks is it's done right at your hive in your apiary. You're not worrying about having to get a bunch of equipment and take larvae somewhere and graft. Now some guys are really good and can graft out in the field, and it's a bit of a science, but it's doable. Next one, it's very quick and simple with the initial notching and splitting done in a few minutes. So you're talking a few minutes to find the queen, a few minutes to notch, you're done. You put the hive aside, you come back a week later, you've got queen cells and options. You don't need tools, just your hive tool or even a stick. I've notched with a stick before if I just wanted one cell notched. It's simple, anyone can do it. Any beekeeper, you think about it, there's a couple of things you really need to get good at, and then one of them is finding a queen, and the other is, just escaped my mind, remembering.
Lighting the smoker.
Yeah, lighting the smoker. What was I talking about here? Oh, identifying the right age larva if you're going to raise your own queens. So finding eggs, finding larvae, seeing the different stages of the brood, it's vital. It's a must. So it's something, though, that might take a few months, a few hive inspections for someone to really pick up. Or they may find out they need to get some reading glasses and a light or something to help them. I see that happening quite a bit, and that's okay. Got to find a way for you to be able to find the eggs and the larvae, the right age.
Sometimes it's difficult even with the veil on.
Yeah.
It kind of blocks you from seeing freshly laid eggs.
Yep. Especially with darker comb, if it's a little bit cloudy, sometimes it's a struggle. Yeah.
But the eggs are easier to see than the just hatched larvae.
Yeah.
Like
it is. I find I'm not looking for larvae specifically, but those little puddles of royal jelly, and I know there's larvae in there just the right age. If it's just a little tiny petal at the very bottom of the cell.
So fun trick to that, if you really are having trouble seeing it, especially that just hatched, if you have a UV flashlight, the kind that you use for like pets finding urine, royal jelly slightly fluoresces, so you will see them floating.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I bought a headlamp. I'm going to try it out next year. I don't need to get in the hives anymore.
I got another question. What's the latest time in the year when you could do this?
It's a very good question. Yeah, for us here, probably middle July is the latest you'd want to be, doing queen rearing. Yeah, maybe you can push it, and then hope for good weather.
I will say, I would argue that if you're up on the lake like we are, okay, as far south as he is, yeah, the end of July is probably game. I have successfully raised queens all the way to the middle of the end of September up here.
You're a crazy man. But there's some years that wouldn't work out. The weather.
Correct. Some years it does not work out.
Yeah. So you're looking ahead a month or two and looking at weather.
But I'm not afraid of August at all.
Yeah.
What's your trick for finding it?
That's a whole class, right? But that's a very good question. My process is I want to get into finding eggs as quick as I can, and usually it's pulling out the second frame, laying up against the hive, and then I'm breaking up my frames quickly to loosen them, and then I'm starting more towards the middle, looking for eggs, just laid eggs. And if the whole frame's laid full of eggs, she's probably on another frame. She's done her work. She's probably moved on. I'm looking for just a few eggs, and then I'm going to find her. But there's also other variables. Did you smoke too much and she's running? Do you have all your boxes together and she's moving down? So learning to break up your boxes and isolate the boxes so she can't run from box to box is one trick. And then trusting your eyes, pulling up frames and going pretty quick, looking in thirds, until you find that shape, flip it over, do the same thing, and then trust in yourself. If she's not there, look at the next one. And invariably, you're gonna start to find her in 3-4 minutes at most. Now, we went through 40 hives one weekend, and there was 2 we just could not find her. I never did find her. She's in there, and they're gangbusters. I just forget it. I'm just letting them go. So it happens.
Yeah, it definitely helps. The first box, take off, prop it up on another box, and so you have those 2 separate. I mean, we went through one like.
Yeah, 3-4
5
times. It's ridiculous. An hour, 2 hours, and they're getting mad. But we run carniolans. They're darker. They're harder to see. They run more. They're mutts, but they run darker. And we don't mark our queens. I never touch my queens. So they just are harder to find. If they're marked and they're lighter, more Italian stock, it'll be easier to find.
One of the other things you can do that I have had work is an old Army trick, which is get yourself a pair of red sunglasses, the old 1970s hippie style ones. Okay. If you take away your color vision, your natural abilities shift to stop seeing color and stop looking for the color, and you start looking for patterns and shapes. At which point she should stand out a little better because she will be bigger. So blind yourself to color vision and rely on shape. That helps some people.
Yeah. Good questions. Another reason why OTS works is it's helping people raise your own local stock. Over time, that's a win for everybody. Your neighbors, you, the bees. You're not genetically bottlenecked. You're doing it the right thing by raising your own queens. However you do it. The best bees, like Mel says, the best bees are the bees you can raise in your own backyard. And that's just borne out over and over again for me as I go through the years, that the benefits of raising your own stock, the survivors, and perpetuating the kinds of bees that you like. Another reason why it's successful is if really you don't ever have to touch the queen. Think about it if you're buying queen from California, which I bought a couple this year just for the fun of it, from Oliveras, however you say that. Someone had to graft that larva, touch the larva, then put it in a cup. It was mated. They had to catch it and paint it. They had to grab it and stick it in a thing, in a carrier, ship it through the mail for a couple days in my case, through hot weather. And then she had to wait on my shelf a day or two, and as her work, her attendants are dying, and I'm giving her drops of honey, and just think of all that stress and caged. She was laying, and now she's not laying. And as compared to you raising your own queen, by just notching, you've never touched that larva. You'll never touch the queen. You don't have to unless you mark her. She'll start laying. She's never caged. She's never stopped from laying when she wants to lay. And I just find overall, in general, it's just a great way to raise queens, raising your own queens like that.
How long do you let your queens live?
Well, mine never live more than about 9 months, and some of them only 2 months, 3 months. So, but they can, these days, because of different pressures they have with our environment, if yours live 2 or 3 years, you're doing good. So some people will have outliers, success, with 4, 5, 6, 7 years, but that's rare. Done right, you can control swarming, and I mean you really can. I haven't had a swarm now in about 6 years because I'm creating those artificial swarms at the right time. We'll talk about that. It requires a brood break. Brood break's one of many tools in your toolkit you can use for managing mites, for raising honey. There's a lot of reasons, good reasons for brood breaks, and it's just one of the reasons why OTS can be successful for you. You'll find that young overwintered queens, the system promotes that. So going into next May, all of my queens were mated in July. They'll only be 6, 7 months old, and they're just going to explode with brood rearing, and I see that every year.
Now, have you been having success as far as keeping your mites particularly low, or are you still supplementing treatment. with
This year I
farm.
supplemented with oxalic. Yeah, I had enough with 35% losses, and it was definitely attributed to mites. Yeah, it was a no-brainer. I have been not treating at all for the last until this year. So 5 years before, I hadn't treated at all since moving to Ohio. And in Oregon, I started with Chandler back in 2004. Barefoot Beekeeper was my first book, I think. And I'd never go back to top bar hives. They're a lot of work.
They're a lot of work. I just thought I would mention that because 35% losses, you can keep going as a hobbyist at 35% losses.
Right.
But it's 35% losses. It's still pretty painful.
Yeah, especially if I'm selling a nuke the next spring for $175 or $200. Do the math. I don't want to. I'm just throwing money out the window by not treating with oxalic when I should. I'm not just throwing oxalic at them, but in a responsible way, I think.
So that way, when I harp on everybody should be checking for mites, you understand why.
Yeah, that's the foundational. That's the foundation of it, is knowing what your mite counts are. At least doing a spot check.
What's the difference between the oxalic acid and the formic?
They're different compounds. They both do a good job. The formic the main difference is formic will get under the capping and destroy mites within the cell and the larva. The part with formic you got to watch out is two things. One, it's really temperature sensitive, and two, it can kill queens. So I do think you can rotate between them if you get good at it. I wouldn't do everything in formic the first year. I would test, do a few of them, get used to it, and really look at the instructions carefully. Yeah. Oxalic, I think is perfect, because if I'm doing brood breaks, which I do twice a year, on the 21st to 24th day, all of my bees have hatched out. There's nothing under capping. I can treat them just once really quickly. Takes 20 seconds with the tool I bought, and there's no mites in that hive, or very few. So it's just really simple.
Sorry, one last question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend for like last treatment? I mean, as far as how far would you go into the season?
You can, it depends on what mechanism you're using. Formic is real temperature sensitive. I don't know what the latest date on that would be. I've only helped someone use formic. I'd have to ask. We'd have to look at that. Oxalic, you can use pretty late. Like some guys are doing it into November, December.
With a vaporizer, if any hives that I leave in Ohio, I try to hit them with oxalic acid vaporizer 2 or 3 days after Christmas.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days after Christmas, I don't have to wear a respirator. The air temperature is cold enough that as soon as the vapor hits the air, it falls out. So I don't have to worry about it getting me. There's nowhere for them to go inside the hive.
Plus they're clustered.
They're clustered,
it's really easy.
and they're darn near broodless.
You can
I
also
get a massive drop.
You can also
And
dribble.
that's the end of the mites for that hive. They'll come into spring with basically a 0 mite load.
Do you wait till about that time, or do you do it before?
Oh no, if you don't do it sometime around August to September, you won't have to do it in December because they will be dead.
So about half of them will be dead for sure.
About quarterly.
Yeah, for me, we'll look at the numbers. I'll show you what I did this year. It might help you understand. So any more questions about OTS? Probably not. Okay. So let's look at what happened with my yard this year. Starting back in fall, I wrapped 32 colonies and prepared them for winter, and came out with 23 alive in April, I think it was. Or really, I think I lost colonies up into April because of our crazy weather. It was just ridiculous.
Fall, spring.
Yeah.
Got a lot of people.
So we had that second point. We had a February warm up to 70 degrees. We went right back to freezing and went back up to warm, freezing. And so I was finding dead hives with bees and splotches that had started to lay eggs, and then they were trying to protect the brood, and then they wouldn't cluster up, and they'd just slowly die off. And it was a crazy year. So also
from the peanut gallery, not to interrupt, formic anytime below 85.
Anytime below 85. Who's listening?
Ed Friel, he's
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Technology. Yeah. I noticed this year, last year, probably a third of my colonies were 5/5 or 4/4 nukes. And I lost the same percentage regardless of if they were in deeps, doubles, or nukes. It really didn't matter. It was about the mite levels and their ability to deal with the weather. So I did burn through a bit more dry sugar. I feed sugar blocks on top with a sugar rim, about 2.5-inch sugar rim. And I just make blocks so I can move the blocks to wherever the cluster is. And it's just really handy. And just give them what they want. So spring came around, and that's when I began my OTS regimen. I began queen rearing this year 3 weeks later than usual. So the year before I started April 15th. This year, actually it was almost a month later. And it was on May 12th when I notched for the first round of when I made my artificial swarms and notched. That day was May 12th this year. And so I pulled 23 artificial swarms out and sold those as nukes to customers. So that was a good year for selling nukes. I wish I could have sold 10 more. That would have been handy. A week later, from those 23, or from the, how many did I have there? Yeah, from the 23, I made 28 starts. So I pretty much, the reason for that is usually I would have split that into two, at least, a double. But my brood numbers were so low this year. It was because so much had died off with the cold weather. I was very limited to how much I could expand this year in the spring. So I went from 23 to 28, and out of those 28, 22 successfully mated 30 days later. It was about 25% failure, which is the highest failure rate I've seen in 6 years. I noticed a lot more dragonflies around this year. The only reason I could think in my backyard, in the 3 different yards I was using, I noticed more birds and more dragonflies. Maybe they had less bugs to deal with because of the weather. I don't know. They were targeting my hives for sure. I was upset. So I had 22. I tested for mites in the yard. I spot checked, and there was 2 or 3 colonies I needed to treat. So I treated with oxalic vapor. So I treat personally. I take the advice I get from Jamie Ellis down in Florida, at the University of Florida. He says as a baseline, if you hit 3%, it's time to treat. You might get by at 3%, depending on the time of year. Like this time of year, you'd probably get by at 3% maybe. But early in the spring, you're not going to get by at 3%. You're looking at failure in July or August, on average. So summer rolled around. I decided not to sell any summer nukes this year. Usually I do, because just my numbers were low. And I started my next round of OTS. And so I removed all the queens. So I killed most of my queens. Usually in the past, though, I'd kill all my queens and I'd have a queen in the yard. That's how much I believe in OTS. It works. I would take that small risk. The first year I did that, I felt really nervous. Killing your queens just doesn't feel right. It never feels right. But this year, I learned how to bank queens. I listened to a guy mention how I can take a frame of honey. What?
Don't do it.
Oh, it worked. It worked. Take a frame of honey is all, a queen and a shake of bees. So no brood. So the only mites in that little banked colony is on the phoretic mites, a few that would be on those bees at that time of year. And I stuck that in a tiny 4 nuke box. And I made
a mated queen already?
Yeah. So one of the queens that had been mated earlier in the spring.
Oh, you put her in a mini mating.
Right.
That is not the same as banking. Shame on you. Wrong term.
Wrong term? Well.
Banking is when you put her in the cage, okay, and then you put the cage in a larger hive.
Oh, I don't like doing that.
Them all, and
yeah.
That's a terrible idea.
I don't like doing that, no.
It damages the root.
So what would you call this?
Technically, you're putting her in a mini mating nuke.
It's a whole.
It's a mini nuke.
Oh, it's a mini nuke, whatever. Okay. So those bees, and we'll take care of that queen. They'll feed off the honey. She'll actually start to lay like a silver dollar size of brood over time. And you can hold her in there for like, I found 45 days was the max before they start having problems with beetles, especially hive beetles. So not all of them, just a couple. But that was a great success for the most part, except I made a dumb mistake on combining them. I tried just, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So a week later, I made 43 starts from the 22. So I had 22 colonies now with a bunch of cells on a bunch of frames, and I go to each colony and break them up into about 2 on average. So I went from 22 to 45 or so starts that now need to raise queens. They're still queenless. By June 12th, so actually, I'm sorry, by August 7th, sorry, 37 of those had mated successfully. So I had 6 of them that didn't mate. Now I need to do something with those colonies, and that's what I banked those queens for. That's what I made those mini nukes with. I would combine those with those colonies to salvage them. And my first go at it, I tried in 1 yard. Someone told me just spray it with sugar water and lemon oil on the queen, on her frame, on the bees inside where she's going next to, and you can just add her direct, just like that. And it worked only on maybe 2 out of 6. It was not a great solution. So from there on out, I just newspaper combined them like I normally would, and it's just easy. It works. So I got back up to essentially about 43 colonies that I'm going to go into winter now. I did check for mites, and I'm at 2 to, oh, I'm sorry. I need to go back. On the 21st day, I did every colony because I checked, and I was between 2 and 4% minimum mite threshold or mite frequency. I decided to treat the whole yard with oxalic during that brood break. So all the colonies on the 21st day I treated with oxalic acid. And did a spot check after, and I found 1 mite in one of the colonies. It really knocks down the mites. It's amazing. So, and because of that, this year I noticed, I remember chatting with Dan last couple of years. Dan, I got bees crawling around on the ground. What the heck, And it was deformed wing virus. It was, the bees weren't just, they weren't. I want A+ bees, and as far as health is concerned, and I could tell my bees were like B-. It was kind of frustrating. It's because of mite levels. The mite levels were too high in some of the colonies, especially. And this year, I have 0 bees crawling around the yard. I've gone through 70 hives, and I saw maybe 2 bees with deformed wing.
That's perfectly within statistics.
Yeah, that's going to happen. You're right. Yeah. Maybe 3 or 4 mites got into one cell and shoot on that poor bee.
It might not even be mites. Remember,
yeah.
It is a bee that they get sick.
Right. It could be something else, right? So who knows? But the bees are just so much more healthy this year. So I've kind of found this niche now, or this a combination of brood break and oxalic vapor during the brood break is just a perfect mix. And I feel like you could perpetually do that, although some people are going to argue you're going to need to mix treatment types so that you're not encouraging the bees to evolve into a different against the mites or against the treatment, oxalic treatment. So that said, I think I was thinking about it. Oxalic actually burns away the legs of the mites. I just can't imagine the mites evolving to the point where
it's like being
in my
doused in
lifetime
gasoline and set on
right.
fire.
I'm always
not going to evolve against
that. I'm always going to burn, right? So there could be other factors I'm just not thinking of.
Is that the mode of action? What oxalic acid kills them?
Yeah,
it burns them.
I didn't realize I actually figured out what actually kills the mites.
If you look at a picture of the mite under a microscope after you've given it oxalic acid, it's a pretty awful way to go.
Yeah, you can tell because it's like that. They drop. They just start dropping.
But they don't have legs anymore.
I mean, technically they have legs, but they're really not in good shape.
Yeah,
like you can see that the
out.
claws have broken down, the joints have failed.
They look bad. Yeah.
Looks like they've been in a car accident.
How long do you have to leave the supers off after you?
Yeah, I don't sell much honey, so there's only a couple hives I worry about that. So you just have to pull it off, treat, and then you can put them back on. The oxalic subsides and actually adheres really quickly to the frames that they're
So you're
supposed to.
saying 15 minutes or an hour?
I don't know, what would you suggest, Dan?
All right, so you get into an interesting legal argument there because the government tells you have to take the supers off, but they do not tell you anything legally about how long you should have the supers
Yeah,
off.
I've never heard any number.
Okay. In Germany, they don't take the supers off at all.
Personally, I think.
Germany is paranoid.
Yeah, personally, I think there's zero risk.
And it's only works that way if you read the instructions that come from brushing Mountain Bee. If you just get your own oxalic acid, there are no instructions.
Right.
So there is no label.
So my advice would be when you pull honey, treat. You don't have any honey on then. There's no argument. Otherwise, if I'm treating before I'm pulling honey, if it's an emergency treatment because my numbers are high, traditionally what I'll do is I'll treat them. I'll take the box off for literally just that night and I'll put them back on in the morning. Pain, but it ends up working. The trick is though, be at that yard when the sun is coming up because otherwise you will start robbing like you have never seen in your life. And that becomes a quite interesting yard to work in.
Yeah.
Is it dangerous, the oxalic acid?
The oxalic acid?
Just to breathe. As you're applying it, you want to wear a mask. Yeah.
So what I hand out to a lot of people is I hand out the drizzle kits.
Right.
You can't possibly hurt yourself with a drizzle kit.
Mm-mm.
The oxalic acid vaporizer, the vaporizer is pretty well, don't breathe that. That would be all bad for you.
Did you bring drizzle kits?
I don't have one tonight, but I can get you one, certainly.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
not a
'cause I
problem.
don't treat,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need to treat.
Okay, I'll make sure I get your drizzle kit.
Suggest 24 hours.
That suggests 24 hours. So the party line from Ed is the 24 hours is how long you should leave your super off.
Yeah. You think about, typically you're going to use 1 gram, and it's just a small bit of oxalic acid in that vaporizer.
Or put a piece of cardboard in between.
That works too. That's a good idea.
You mean between the supers and the?
Correct, because I'll chew through.
So you said you treated like on day 21 of the brood break, and that's because you said they have all crawled out and so all the mice are there.
Right.
Is that a logic?
Right. Now, so you really technically should wait to day 24 or 5 because then every drone as well, because they're in the cell longer. But I had few drones. I didn't worry about it.
If you're treating not during a brood break for emergency reasons or whatever, is there any sort of thinking, you might have open brood, you might not?
Yeah,
if you're treating emergency use, you just treat.
You need 3 treatments then. So you would treat that day, 7 days later, 7 days later, or some people, you could do 5 days later, 5 days later. It's.
And you've been recommending that for the vaporizer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because for dribble, I don't recommend anybody treat that often.
Because like 9 days ago, I had a 4% count, so I dribbled.
Yep.
So
Wait 3 weeks.
Yeah, I would wait 3 weeks or so and test again.
Drizzle is a lot stronger of an acid against the bees themselves. If you drizzle more than, realistically, I think the upper limit is probably 8 times. You're going to damage the wings of the bees enough that those bees aren't going to be capable of flying.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't generally matter because usually the bees have aged out by old age before that's ever an issue. If you're making splits like me and him both do, my bees aren't around to get treated that often. Okay, I've replaced the queen by then. But if you were to try to keep your queen for multiple years, you would certainly have basically dissolved her wings.
Yeah.
Do you have to take the supers off when you dribble?
Oh yeah.
You just dribble on the brood, not between the brood, you don't do that.
Yeah, it's like 6 milliliters per seam of bees. And so you have I've never done it, but there's good YouTube videos that show you.
It's just where you see brood,
Yeah,
do it all.
yeah. So you just kind of get the knack of how much to squeeze to get 6 per seam.
Just keep in mind, because we talk about how the oxalic acid is so harsh against the honeybees. Remember that is the main acid in rhubarb and spinach. We are not exactly talking about a terribly toxic substance.
No.
If you drank a pint of it, I'm pretty sure it would jack your kidneys up. but I'm pretty sure that you'd have trouble drinking a pint of it.
Yeah.
When you do you treat like one deep at a time, or is it the seam being both deeps, or?
A seam is the space between the frames.
Right.
Okay, and I put 4 to 6 milliliters between every seam. So if it's a deep, I aim for 6. If it's a medium, I usually aim for 5. But
So you're
just one box at a time.
yeah,
So it's
you're
like
disassembling the
It's
honey.
like one deep.
Yeah.
You do that while
Just the brood boxes, though. Don't treat the
So-
honey supers. That's
Right.
not useful.
Yeah, so 1 to 2 boxes per colony. Yeah,
Well,
Usually.
sometimes 4 or 5.
yeah, unless you're crazy.
Get
Man.
monsters.
Yeah. Okay. So looking ahead to winter, point 4 there, I noticed the bees are a bit light on stores this year. May need to feed. We'll watch that. I noticed the smell in the backyard's really potent with the goldenrod just as of today and yesterday a little bit. So, and there's a lot of goldenrod out there this year because of the rain. I didn't have hornets and yellow jackets until like 2 weeks ago. So I set up traps. Usually they're in the yard much sooner. I use apple cider vinegar, sugar water, and banana peel in a 2-liter, and it works pretty good for getting the European hornets and the yellow jackets with a little hole on top.
Can of sardines also works really well.
Yeah, there's other methods.
And where do you place your traps then?
I just stick them on top of the hive.
The actual
Yeah.
hive itself?
About 1 per 4 colonies or so.
I usually put them more like 20 feet away, just because I'm not trying to deal with that while I work the bees.
Yeah. It depends how bad the infestation is. If they're like, I've seen some YouTube videos where there's like the bee man's got one and there's yellow jackets everywhere, I'd probably stick them in the trees somewhere far away. Okay. Some things I learned this year, changes I made. Number 1, we talked about adding oxalic vapor during the brood break. That's something I learned and did this year with success. I consolidated all my equipment to 10 frame this year, deeps. I had everything in deeps, but I was using nukes and mini nukes, and I just got rid of them, and I'm all deeps now, 10 frame. And I'm really glad for that. Whatever you're going to consolidate on, I really encourage it. It could be 8 frame medium, whatever, consolidate. We talked about banking queens on 1 frame of honey. We talked about the newspaper combines. Another way that works well is using a double mesh, a screen. Call them snow grove boards, or there's another name for them. But it just lets the colonies breathe. The atmosphere can change, go back and forth, and they get to know each other. And then you can, a day later, take out that screen, and they'll be just fine. One of my yards was in a shady area, and I'm gonna move the yard. I've never experienced that before, but having your bees in shade just didn't work for me this year. So that's all I've got, Dan.
So the bees that were in the shade would get you small hive beetle mostly?
I saw a little bit more small hive beetle, yeah, but they just weren't as industrious. They were kind of lazy.
A lot of times, if you're in deep shade, it's more of a problem in the south than it is up here. But up here, if you had small hive beetle, they will explode in the shade. They seem to do a better job of driving them out in full sun. The other one that you'll run into in shade a lot of times is actually chalk brood. So if you start seeing a lot of chalk brood, it might be too wet in your area, and that's usually mostly a shade issue.
Yeah, if you're in a low spot and shade, you're asking for it. Yeah.
For sure.
Good, that's all I got. Unless there's any other questions.
So, let's see, and now my light fell asleep. Good times. All right, so I will mention one more time that this is the time of the year that you need to check for mites. If you check for mites now, you will still have bees in the spring. If you do not actively start doing things to stop the mites now, your chances of overwintering are much, much less. And almost every single person's hives that I do autopsies to in the spring, I hate to say it, but because I end up sounding like a broken record, it's usually mites. Test them.
There's a mite group.
Yeah, you'll see the sugar crystals. That's a frame out where the brood area was. You'll look directly down it this way, and you'll see what looks like little sugar crystals at the tip of some of the cells. And that is the pee from the mite that they leave behind as a telltale mark that
Camera shut off.
it's okay. Nobody needs to see me. Fair enough. But yeah, that's a telltale one. If anybody wants one, I still have some of these. I tell everybody to do the alcohol wash. I still highly recommend the alcohol wash. But don't let their death be in vain. Then take 50 bees, put them in here, bring me this, and I will test for nosema and whatever ailments you might have. Because things are out there. You know, like I said, I spotted European foul brood. Sucks, but it is here, and it's just part of the reality of beekeeping. I know at the beginning of the year we were having nosema around some places, and I know some of the packages we even saw that came in had nosema in them straight out the gate. So I gave people, you know, a special treatment for that. But I haven't actually seen anybody with nosema, so I think that pretty much went away. Yay. I'm happy about that. That's one of those silent killers. You never really, nosema doesn't show up in any way, shape, or form, except that the hive fails to thrive, slowly dwindles over winter. So if you don't test for it, you don't know. So even if you think they're healthy, bring me a sample. I'm not kidding. It's a free test. It's not worth risking it. You know, it takes me a whole 5 minutes to put them on a slide.
So if I had 20 colonies in a yard,
I'd check 10%. So at least 2. And I would be somewhat unscientific on that. I would pick the 2 that look bad. Okay. You know, random samples are usually the way to go, but honestly, if you think there's something wrong with it, that's the one you sample for bee diseases. The strong ones probably don't have a problem. Anybody else have any questions for John or me, or questions in general?
I have a question. People are always talking about the honey flow.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a honey flow, and what is flowing? I mean, it seems to me there's something always, you know, a little bit blooming up all year round.
You want to cover that?
So yeah, that's a good question. There's really like 2 for sure, sometimes 3, I would say.
Oh, come on. You're being modest. We're in Ohio. There's a ton of them. You're still thinking like you're back home in
Well, I'm thinking, when I think flow, I'm thinking where it's just they're socking it away, where they're really bringing it in, you know.
So flow is greatly influenced by your area, okay? Ohio really doesn't have a dearth anymore. If you go back 10 years ago, we used to have probably late July to late August, you had to feed your bees or you weren't gonna get any honey. The problem is that we didn't have any natural flowers in the area that were nectar producers. So the colony started getting really temperamental and crappy, and they would sting you just as soon as you walked out there because the colony was losing weight, okay? And as soon as a beehive starts losing weight, they kind of get a little upset with you. Thanks to ODOT planting the invasive species bird's foot trefoil along all of the major highways, that has spread throughout Ohio like pestilence.
Because I've never seen the trefoil.
You can't possibly have not seen it. It is a yellow plague upon us.
Yeah.
So August.
I mean, I've seen these little yellow flowers, but I look up and they don't look like the trefoil.
Trust me, bird foot trefoil is along every major highway, and it's even in most neighborhoods now.
Is it real short?
It's real short. It's this little bitty flower. When you look at it real close, it kind of looks like an orchid. Yeah, bird's foot trefoil. Produces a lovely honey that kind of reminds you of Kellogg's cornflakes. Sells very well. Used to be that we would feed them a couple 100 pounds of sugar to be able to get by, and now we take a couple of 100 pounds of honey.
So when is the flow? You're going to say you have like 2
Well, I had a bit of a deer. Well, I kind of look at this early spring. I'm getting a good flow.
And that'd be locust linden.
From like dandelion for a good month and a half or so.
Because when people say dandelion, I say, well, dandelion's good for getting them ready for the flow. It's like, you know, so.
That's just a marker. That means there's all kinds of, the trees are.
Your bees haven't made it through winter until you see dandelions. You know, that's when the risk pretty much ends.
And then there's a fall flow, goldenrod asters right now.
But in the summertime in Ohio, realistically, you get dandelion, which they're mostly going to build up on. You're not going to get most of that. That is a flow, and if you need to build up wax, if you need to have them draw out boxes, that is the perfect time to start checkerboarding undrawn comb into your drawn comb on top of the supers. they will start drawing out wax fairly quick with that. The next flow after that, I want to say is linden. I can't remember if locust comes first or linden comes first.
Locust.
Okay, so locust. So that's the next flow. That's a big one.
Basswood too, which is earlier, isn't it? Or
I think locust is technically basswood.
Basswood and
No,
linden.
Lynn.
Basswood and linden, okay. So either way, like I said, I get those flopped. But you've got the two trees. After that, you get tulip poplar. So depending on your area, you can wind up with tulip poplar.
I've never seen any bees on them, but I have them.
Oh, it makes a ton of honey. So you get those three flows right back to back. They overlap just a little bit. They don't overlap much. About the time that those start petering out, you're going to start seeing the clover start producing more and more. Once the clover starts producing, you'll ride that all the way through the
Do
summer.
they actually make honey though from clover in this neck of the woods with,
If you got enough clover, absolutely.
I heard the acidic soil, they don't produce that much nectar.
Well, okay, but it depends on your area and it depends on, what type of clover. So you know that little pink stuff? There's a pink type of clover called an all-site clover. And
Yeah,
you'll find that in some people's lawns.
find that in pastures too.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes a disproportionately large amount of nectar.
Ah,
The standard white Dutch clover you find in your lawn,
yeah.
it makes clover honey, but it doesn't make a lot. That all-site is truly disproportionate. Red clovers, they make honey, but you got to have special bees.
Yeah, because they're too big.
The stuff that's really good would be that wild, tall, yellow and white
The
sweet clover.
the sweet clover, yeah, but the deer eat that. I don't have any of that
Sure.
at all. I can't, nowhere in my yard or my woods or whatever. It's because the deer just have one.
But all of those are different flows technically.
All right.
So flow is very much dependent on your area and how much is coming in. How fast you're drawing wax is usually the best indicator of whether you have a good flow on. During the flow is realistically when they're going to make the most wax. They will slow down and not make wax unless the flow is particularly strong.
I'm in a terrible Solon suburb and I have dirt. It's ridiculous.
Well,
It's a terrible
suburbs.
spot. Yeah, it's obvious.
The problem is that you wouldn't have a Darth if your neighbors didn't use so much True Lawn.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the perfectly manicured green lawns.
We don't do that where I live.
That is against beekeeping.
Manicure, that's kind of a.
Any other questions?
So how much, like when I went in my hive yesterday, like I don't feel like they're putting that much honey away at all. Like, why?
Well, I mean, that's a hard one to answer without looking at a beehive.
There's hardly any honey at all in there. But my other hive is like, I have the one top bar hive
Okay,
and it's gangbusters. I mean,
then I would make the argument you might have an illness. Take a sample.
yeah.
Because
But
you
my
could
other
very
one
easily
just
have,
doesn't seem,
what does your brood pattern look like?
A whole lot of brood, really.
Well, there you go. How much pollen do you have?
Not much pollen, not
not
much.
going into that one
Yeah.
hardly at all.
Yeah,
It's all wrong.
She has a bunch of queen cells.
Never mind.
Yeah, I have queen cells in there too.
Well, you have a failing queen.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought it would be.
So I'll tell you what, sometimes it might not be failing queen, it might be something going on. So it's still worth a disease test.
Yeah.
But odds are that you have a failing queen and that queen needs to go away and you'll have better luck.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get too sentimental and we don't think about the beehive as a colony organism. Sometimes the right answer is off with her head.
So, but it's so,
It's also a first year
Sure,
queen. No, it's-
sure. But was it purchased from a package?
Yeah,
There you go, right there. So the reason I interrupted and talked to him about the queen banking, when they ship bees for long distances,
Yeah.
a lot of times what they do is banking, okay?
Yeah.
And that queen, because it was raised out in California, they had 500 of them in a box,
Yeah.
already in the little cage, and she sat there for a week before they sold it to you. By the time you get it, it's been in that box for 11 days.
all right, that's making me sad.
Her ovaries have started to shrink
Gotta raise
because she
your own.
couldn't,
Okay.
her
So-
ovaries have already started to shrink.
I don't.
She will never
That
be.
sounds awful. Okay. So whose ovaries wants to shrink? So now I have like 4 or 5 queen cells in there. Isn't it gonna be too late? Is it gonna make it? I feel like we're
How
really
far,
late.
how close to the lake do you live?
Come on.
Are you within 10 miles?
Yeah, within 10 miles.
You'll be fine.
Yeah?
If you're south of 10 miles, don't try it. Think of the area that we consider the snow belt,
I
okay?
feel like it's right over my house.
Okay, so this is the thing that nobody ever talks about. The snow belt, because of being the snow belt,
Yeah.
is also an extended summer.
Banana belt.
We have more heat and humidity longer into the year because the giant ice cube isn't an ice cube yet.
Right.
It artificially heats us. We start our season damn near a month and a half later than he starts. I'll drive south and I'll see people beekeeping and I'll be like, there's snow at my house. So our season is shifted. We can get away with raising a queen this late. Ain't gonna happen for him.
I guess we'll see.
It's one of the reasons why we like to go to Florida, because our bees don't even realize it's winter.
Yeah.
Our bees don't even kick out the drones when we go south. They just flat don't realize it's cold, because it's not cold to them.
How many queen cells would you say you had in there?
There was like 5, wasn't there?
Probably,
Would you leave all 5 in there?
we have so
Yeah.
far, yeah.
Personally, no, I go through an X-Acto knife 3 of them.
I mean, just one. What if I'm leaving the one that's like,
That's the special one. It should be-
So as awful as it sounds, it's very subjective, but my general rule is the big ones get to stay, the little one's gonna die. So
yeah?
the fattest and the biggest survives, the little one ain't gonna make it.
So just leave one.
Yep.
Or
Two.
A lot of nectar.
There's like 3 put together on one front. Maybe leave all
Okay.
3 of them on one front.
So this is gonna sound strange, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I know I didn't realize this my first 3 years of beekeeping, okay? Clover honey does not get capped.
Yeah, but my bees go to the park for the weekend.
Yeah!
What?
Funny thing you learn from commercial beekeepers. Clover honey is almost never capped by bees
Why?
because it can naturally tolerate a higher moisture content. Clover honey can take up to 20%, okay? You know how normally they tell you want to be 18 to 19%? Clover honey is safe at 20%, okay? Because the bees know this, usually they don't cap it. They try to use it first, but they don't cap it. So if you take out what you think is nectar and you shake it vigorously and it does not fall out, okay, take it with you. Get a hydrometer, test the actual water content. It probably is going to be 18 to 20%. It's probably perfectly harvestable honey. My first 3 years of beekeeping, I have a lot of clover around me. Oh, I had 4 or 5 boxes that I never harvested because that's not honey, it's not capped. My partner, my first year, lots of honey sitting in the yard, and he looks at me and goes, "Why aren't you taking that?" Well, it's not capped. Test the moisture. That's $500 worth of honey. That's coming with us. Buy the tester.
What's the watery stuff we had this year? Get any of that? Really runny?
No, I didn't get anything really runny.
Captain.
Capped and really, oh, I did get something that was capped and really runny, and I tested that for pollen, and that was trefoil. That was
see more of this year.
Oh yeah, it's a plague. It's here, man, and you're gonna see more every year.
So
Probably middle of July, you saw that.
I mean, it's so runny. I didn't want to sell it.
Yeah, tested it, was fine.
I looked at it.
And if you get one that's particularly runny, as long as it passes your, hydrometer, the moisture is correct, mix it into something else. You can thicken it up. Then it's a wildflower. The catch-all term for, I don't really know, I mixed it. But, yeah, but yeah, test it. Those little testers pay for themselves relatively quickly just because you go, oh, that is good. At some point, we may get one of the digital ones for the club. They are expensive. I'm probably going to break down and buy one pretty soon just because that little hand one is making me want to drive myself nuts. And I like toys. My wife knows. Any other questions? Fair enough. I got nothing else. I have a suit for you in my vehicle. I have more suits if anybody wants to buy other suits or jackets. Suit for you, I believe, too.
Yeah.
And I got a jacket for you, because I know you said you wanted one. I have the lovely little sample if you want to take these. And we talked last time about making the jars for doing mite sampling, and I've got the stuff for that in my vehicle as well. So, but I have nothing else. Anybody else have anything they want to? Then I move to adjourn. So moved. So seconded.
Okay.